Alright, so let's say this is r, this is small r. We are trying to find out somehow the coordinate of this point. So let's say this distance is x. We already know the distance between these 2 points, right? Because we know the coordinate of the center. So let's say this distance is d. So this is d minus x, right? Now for these 2 rectangles, and let's say this is y. So for these 2 triangles, you can form equation through Pythagoras theorem. So that would go like x square plus y square is equal to r square, and d minus x square plus y square equal to small r square. You can eliminate y from here by subtracting these 2 equations. We'll get a quadratic equation in terms of x. The solution would come out to be this, but basically you get the idea, right? You can form 2 equations. If you subtract the 2 equations, you'll get a quadratic in terms of x. You can solve for x. So once you get x, you can translate this vector by this much distance. You'll get the vector for this point. Once you get the vector for this point, you can follow the method which Sumani told. So this is clear, right? Right. So one of the major problems which you incur while you're solving geometry problems is precision. And one of the biggest reason why he was explaining to you the vector algebra is that most of the time, whenever you encounter division or whenever you're dealing with floating point numbers, you tend to run into a lot of floating point precision issues. So like it was a case, it has been a case with many of the teams that even if you know the formula, if you don't have the right implementation, you might get stuck into wrong answers and all. So it is very essential that whenever you are dealing with floating point numbers, try to avoid divisions and all, and avoid having relations like A is equal to B or something, because even if A and B are equal, due to the representation that they have, this relation might not hold. So I guess you people would be aware of how a floating point number is represented in a system. So I'm assuming that you already know that. So I'll tell you a little tips and tricks on how to deal with comparisons on floating point numbers. So actually there is an article by Messoff on Topcoder for the same, which you can go through later. But I'll just brief you a little on this. So I'll just cover the 3 comparison operations. So the first operation is if you're supposed to compare 2 numbers A and B, which are floating point numbers, for equality. As I said, A equal to B might not always return true even if A and B are equal, because of floating point issues. So let's say you define an epsilon which is very low. Let's say it's 1e minus 7. You can choose epsilon as and when you want. So you can have comparisons like, or just FABS of A minus B is less than epsilon. FABS, one more thing. You have ABS function in C++ to give you the absolute value. That ABS function does not work on floating point numbers. So whenever you need to take absolute of floating point numbers, instead of using ABS, use FABS or define an absolute function of your own. Okay. So you can directly check if the absolute value of A minus B is less than epsilon. In that case, the 2 numbers are equal. So with this, the probability that you'll run into wrong answers is fairly less. So similarly, whenever you're doing a less than operation, so let's say you want to check A less than B or A greater than B, both these cases are quite similar. So you can just check if A minus epsilon is also less than B. Then in that case, Yeah, in that case you can assume that A is less than B. If A plus epsilon is less than B, then you can assume that A is less than B. Similarly for this, you can just check if A minus epsilon is greater than B, then you can assume that A is greater than B. This makes sense, right?
Yes.
Okay.
For less than or equal to what?
Sorry?
For less than or equal to what?
Yeah, they can check separately for A less than B and A equal to B. So this is the basic idea. I mean, these are very small tips and tricks which will help you stay away from wrong answers. These things take a little while to get into your coding practice, but it's really good to have such things. In fact, as I mentioned yesterday, have a template of your own. So probably you can include these kind of things into your template, so that you don't have to type these again and again. Define some macros. You guys are aware of macros, right? So define some macros which are there for doing these kind of operations. So you can just call those macros and this will be taken care of. So I'll be covering number 3 now. I'm hoping that you are familiar with few of the very basic maths techniques or number 3 techniques, mostly like divisibility. You would know what do I mean when I say A is a divisor of B, right? There are some very basic postulates of modular arithmetic which I would again expect you to know. But anyhow, just for your convenience, I have mentioned it on the slides. A plus B mod C is equal to A mod C plus B mod C whole mod C. Similarly, A minus B mod C is equal to A mod C minus B mod C whole mod C. And similar is the case for multiplication. And since we'll be using that, what do we say? Notation. What is the same? We'll be using that notation for this class, so I'll just explain to you what that notation means. This is read as A congruent B modulo n, which means that A mod n is equal to B mod n. This is what it means. Okay? This is not an equal sign. This is a congruent sign. This means A mod n is equal to B mod n. I hope this is clear. Please have this in mind for the whole of this lecture because I'll be using this notation. Okay. So you guys know what is the method for calculating GCD, right? So that's called Euclid's method. Now, so that goes like, suppose I have this linear equation, ax plus by is equal to c. And let's say I know A and let's say I know B. So a thing is that if GCD of A and B is G, then G should be a divisor of C. The reason being that if GCD of A and B is G, so we can write A as some K1 times G, B as K2 times G. We can take G out common from here. So if it divides LHS, it should also divide RHS. So that way, G should be a divisor of C. This part you get, right? So during Euclid's, what we are actually doing is we're trying to solve Ax plus By is equal to G. The method that we follow. Okay? So I'll demonstrate it using an example. Let's say, can you suggest any two numbers? कोई दो नंबर सजेस्ट कर
15 and 17.
15 and 25.
Okay, 15 and 25. So what you do is, this is the Euclid's method. Again, I expect that you would already know this, but I'm just for the sake of clarity, I'm writing this because this will be used here. So what you do is, you write 25 is equal to 15 into 1 plus 10. 10 is the remainder, 1 is the quotient. Now you pick this number, write it here. You pick this number, you divide this number by this, so you get. Now again, this goes here, this comes here. When you get a 0, then this number is actually a GCD. This is what the Euclid's method looks like, okay? So the extended GCD method, what we just want to do is, we want to find out x and y such that 15x plus 25y is equal to 5, right? So it's fairly simple. What we'll do is, from this equation we can get that 25 is equal to 25 minus 15 into 1. From this equation we can get 5 is equal to 15 minus 10 into 1. We already know 10 in terms of 25 and 15, so we can substitute it here. So this way we'll get what would be 5 in terms of 15 and 25. This was only a two-step method, so it became very easy. But when you keep on substituting, ultimately you will end up with the GCD in terms of A and B. So that way you can figure out what x and y are. This might not be the only solution. There could be multiple solutions for x and y, but let's just say that we are concerned with one of the solutions. So this is the pseudocode that looks for that. This is what it looks like for extended GCD. This is very similar to the Euclidean code that you use for calculating GCD. The thing is that most of the time when you will be coding in programming competitions, you would not necessarily need to code extended GCD every time. So it is advisable that you have this into your library. Whenever you need to use it, just include that part of the code in your code. Yeah. In this code, yeah, of course, that case is not handled when b is equal to 0. You might have to handle it separately. So that's not an issue. Okay, next slide. Yeah. So before we move on to the other topic, I'd like you to attempt a few problems. It's better if you attempt even the first problem, that's okay. So you're given a range of A to B. Let's say the range is 2 to 10 power 6. You have to calculate for every number in that range the sum of its divisors. Okay. The solution is correct, but not fast enough. So what he says is that for every number, you take a loop till square root of that number. If the number that you're checking is actually a factor of the number n. So let's say you're trying to find out the sum of factors for a number n. And you take a loop of a from 2 to square root. So if n mod a is 0, that is if a is divisor of n, then n by a will also be a divisor, because n is equal to a into n by a. Right? So you can do that for every a from 2 to square root of n. You will get all the list of factors of the number and you can sum them up, which is fairly correct. But the problem here is that we have about 10 power 6 numbers. For every number, if you loop till square root of that number, your time complexity will be equal to n root n, which would be about 10 power 9. So as we discussed yesterday, this code is going to take about 15 to 20 seconds. So if you can do
We find all the prime numbers in the range.
Okay. No, it's not a problem. Just tell your approach.
First find all the prime numbers in the range from 1 to 10 power 6.
Okay.
And then suppose for example if you consider 2, the prime number 2, all the numbers which are factor of 2, we will
The
consider
prime number doesn't have any other factor except for its.
not the factor multiple of 2.
Okay, for all the numbers that are multiple of 2. Yeah.
Actually we can consider 2 power 15 or 2 power 30
Okay.
up till that point, and how many multiples of 2 power 30 will be there in the range 1 to 10 power 6.
Okay. Okay, first of all, how do you find all the prime numbers in a range?
So that's using the C of S.
Okay, so I'll be introducing C with the rest of things. After that, yeah, 1 second.
And after that,
For every prime, you're seeing its multiple and then adding what?
if you consider prime number, say, power of 2, say 2 power 10. Okay. Now we need to consider how many times in this range, how many multiples are there, which are the how many numbers are there which are multiple of 2 power 10.
Okay.